Welcome to I Heart Geek.
And welcome to another episode of I Heart Geek. I am so looking forward to this episode.
The graphic edition. I mean, we don't have to be family friendly this time.
No, we still got to be family friendly. Yeah. No, we're not a Vertigo. We're a DC.
Okay.
Absolutely no Boom Studios.
Even though we might talk about Vertigo, they will probably get mentioned.
Will be brought up. Yes.
Yes.
You know, and I gotta show this. It was my birthday. This is what one of my kids got me because I have to put this up.
Stand.
And for those of you who are listening and not watching the video, he's wearing a Watchman shirt with Rorschach on.
Rorschach.
Yeah. So sorry, made me happy. I had to brag a little bit, do my humble bragging, I guess.
3 times now.
Well, but it wasn't to our listeners. It was to us.
That's true.
Different.
Right. 2 times to us, once to the listeners.
Once to listeners.
So today's show is on graphic novels, and it is brought to you by a fake measuring stick of what is geek and what is not that doesn't really exist that we all like to think does. Yeah. Was that abstract enough? That was abstract like the Sandman.
Wow.
I'm just saying.
Wow. That was... No, it wasn't really. Okay. Anyway, moving on.
I try. Okay. Okay, so let's introduce everybody, and I want to know what was the first graphic novel you ever read. I'm Dub, and I produce stuff. And the first graphic novel I think I ever read was a collected edition of an old Green Lantern story, which doesn't make a difference one way or the other, but that's the first collected edition, quote unquote, graphic novel I ever read. Courtney, who are you? What are you doing? What was your first graphic novel?
I'm Miss Geeky Page. And I handle our and I handle our Instagram, and I may be doing our website. I don't know. We haven't decided. I don't remember what my first graphic novel that I read was, to be honest.
Fair enough.
I have literally no clue. I'm like drawing the biggest blank ever.
See, now if
well, go home and think about it and then come back when you know.
I'm already here.
Oh, okay.
She could probably turn around and look and probably see it.
My graphic novels are over there.
Oh, okay.
The comic books are on the other side of the den, and these are the books.
It's from the other side?
The other side of the den.
Oh, yes.
Mine are over there.
Some of mine are back here.
I actually think I have some down here on the floor.
Nice.
With Chaplin.
Blythe, who are you? What do you do? And what was your first graphic novel?
I'm Blythe. I'm the tech guy, and I normally do the YouTube stuff, but you've kind of taken it over since I got the little guy now. But first graphic novel that I remember, and I think when I was a little kid, I went and visited my uncle, and he had a giant comic book collection. I was like, this is the coolest thing. I want to collect comic books. My parents bought me like 5 comic books, and then I never did anything with it again. And then years later, I read Old Man Logan, the graphic novel, and that like kickstarted me into, I was like, oh yeah, I wanted to collect comic books when I was a little kid, but now I'm older and I have my own money to do so I'll do it myself.
So this uncle and these comic books, are they still out there somewhere?
Wow.
They are still out there somewhere. I remember
that was so vulture-y.
Going through his
blatantly, yeah.
I remember going through his collection years back, and he had some good stuff in there.
Cool.
Now I've got this stuff behind me that I have picked out. That is pretty cool. But yeah, Old Man Logan jumped me back into the whole geekdom of comic book collecting.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. So what do you guys consider? Oh, wait, no. Wait. Back up. You know what? Because Jason, you just talked, so I was like, okay, I introduced you. That's PB&Jason, and he does stuff for the show, and
it constantly gets omitted in the conversation.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say constantly.
He's the curmudgeon.
Frequently gets omitted.
No, that's you.
Okay.
You've taken that over.
Okay. So
what's
yes,
your-
I'm PB&Jason. If we had a top 6 main event, my first graphic novel would have made the list, and that would be The Death of Captain Marvel, for the Marvel novel, which was the first graphic novel I read, the first comic that ever made me cry.
Really?
Was that one? Yes, it was. It was a story about a superhero that, through everything that he went through, ended up dying from cancer, and that just was a profound notion at the time. And yeah, so
It's too real for comic books. Too real.
Yeah, it was too real. But it's a well done book. Absolutely.
Yeah. Fair enough. Okay, so let's get kind of right into this topic. I've been so excited about this because I love graphic novels. What do we consider to be graphic novels? Is the collected edition of a story arc, is that a graphic novel? Does it have to be written as a one-piece story?
I think it's
both. A lot of questions.
Yeah, I think it's both. I think it's either a standalone or Elseworlds type tale, or it's a collection of former editions into one compilation, in my opinion.
Because it's not necessarily a compilation of things, because some things just come out as graphic novels, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, one-shot type
The collected
things.
editions usually do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think it's a mix of both. You have some things that are just straight up graphic novel stories, but then you also have a collection of a story that was released over however many issues, like Blackest Night.
Yeah, that was so many issues, and now it is so many books, and you can see like a quarter of that right there. All those black books, that's just Blackest Night and the spin-offs. Courtney, what about you? Do you see anything different on that?
No, I agree with that. It's you can have both. So if it's been collected, it becomes a novel, or if it starts its life as a novel.
Fair enough.
It's the quickest topic we've ever blazed through.
And we're done.
Amazing.
We're done.
Yeah.
That was a good show.
Geeking on, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye,
No,
everybody.
We're not even there. Actually, you know what? Honestly, when I started to get back into comics in a big way, the whole graphic novel vernacular bothered me because it felt so pretentious. Like, I'm not reading a comic, I'm reading a graphic novel. Yeah, there was a lot of that. It was a way for comic book readers to feel like they were a little superior, I think. Did anybody else get that, or is that just like an impression that I got?
So did graphic novel people come up to you pitiful issue reader and beat you up and steal your lunch money?
Yes.
Is that what happened? It's terrible.
I can't picture anybody beating Dub up for his lunch money.
Probably not. I used to be a lot skinnier though.
Like, I feel like you would kick somebody's booty if they tried that. But anyway,
especially if they were actually going after his lunch money.
Exactly.
But joking aside, I mean, does it feel like it? At least when it first started, does it feel like it's a pretentious thing to try to set? This is more.
I can't say that I ever thought that way. Not that there's anything wrong with that thought. Certainly, a lot of things in the comic world or in the geek world deal with pretension. At times. But I can't say, I mean, certainly DC versus Marvel as an example, but I can't apply it to that, at least in my experiences.
I actually think it's the other way around. I think that the people who went and bought the issue week to week and had a pull box at the comic book store and stuff would look down on the people who read the graphic novels. Okay. Like, you don't collect week to week.
True, the purist thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're not a real fan because you don't buy week to week. You wait for the whole thing to come out. I have the first printing of the first issue. Yeah, that whole thing. So I would say it's the other way around.
Yeah, no,
good point.
I quit quite a while ago on the single issue because I ran out of space.
Not cost effective.
It's expensive. No. And you realize, okay, well, I got something that I'm going to read once, put into plastic, and never get the chance to read again. Now, when I get graphic novels or I go digital, I read books probably 10 to 20 times now, as opposed to the one time we used to read them because it's like, well, you don't want to touch it. It might be worth something. And let's be honest, anything that's come out since the 80s is not going to be worth anything.
Not worth nothing.
You do it because you love it. Mm-hmm. That's why I love the graphic novel concept, because it doesn't feel like, well, this is an investment. It's like, no, I'm reading this because I love this. Mm-hmm. This is, first time you read The Watchmen, you're like, I read this in a collected edition, and it's important, and I can read it as much as I want, and I can dog ear the pages. I can do what I need to do, and that's why I have more love for the graphic novel, I guess, because to me it's more, no pretension there at all for me, because I don't care. If you have the first edition, that's awesome, good for you. I have like the 15th printing of The Watchmen, and I'm happy with it. But I feel like I can really, it's a lot easier for me to get into the story and immerse myself. Blige, we were talking earlier about this with DC versus Marvel, and DC, and this is just purely opinion. I prefer DC Comics to Marvel for a lot of reasons. But you were saying that DC makes better graphic novels because it's easier when you jump in completely instead of the week to week. Is there something to that? And I say that to me is my love in reading, is when I can read.
That was actually me who said that, and Blige who added on.
Yeah.
Okay,
but we're just omitting PB and Jason left and right, so why not?
Well, actually, it's two lefts because you're on the left side. So yeah, I apologize.
But Blige did add on. So please, Blige, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think, for me, and that may just be a personal opinion of me, because you guys know I'm a big Marvel guy, but I do enjoy reading DC books, but I never got into getting them week to week. When I was actively collecting comics, I bought the big Marvel storylines and got them week to week, and then I would pick up a DC book here or there, and I just couldn't get into it. But then I would go back and read the full length of that story that I had tried to pick up previously, and I loved it. I just think, and it may just be kind of more darker undertone that DC usually has, but I
never see that.
It's just overarching stories, I think, are better in one bulk sum as opposed to just week to week.
Jason, would you like to add on to Blige's now, since you?
Well, you're gonna mention the thing about, like, do you prefer the issue based, or do you like it when it's all together?
That's part of this conversation.
Yeah, and I definitely like the graphic novel, because I like to get the whole story at once. It's kind of like streaming, how I like, to be able to watch all the episodes. And it was kind of weird during The Mandalorian having to wait again, the week to week thing. But then again, there was something about that was kind of cool too, because you had something to look forward to. So it's interesting, the benefits of the all at once, or the in doses, as it were. But yeah, DC, I'm more of a Marvel guy too, but I find the graphic novel content of DC to be overall kind of superior to Marvel, even though, there's some wonderful Marvel stories and some good Marvel graphic novels, but I don't know, DC kind of rules that roost, in my opinion, for sure.
Fair enough. Courtney, would you like to add on to this?
I guess I'm going to go back and just mention, you mentioned in the beginning, did you see that graphic novel readers look down their nose at single issue look their down at? In my case, it was different, because when I started reading comic books, back to that time, we weren't supposed to be reading comic books. They weren't for us. So we didn't really read them out in the open anyways. So I never really experienced, I read them with my cousins, and they could have cared less, because I was their cousin and we had comic books. But I couldn't tell you if one would look down on the other, because girls weren't supposed to read either one.
Yeah.
So we didn't read them in public anyways. Well, now we can.
I don't. I say your experience is your experience, but I never.
Yeah, that's from the girl side.
I've never seen it that way, because I've always seen, the more of the stereotypical of, a girl went in a comic store. Oh my gosh, what do I do? And I guess I know that's a lot of that stereotype, but it seems like there's, a chick that reads comics. Oh my gosh, I love you. And I don't know if that's a new thing.
The first time I went into a comic book store here, I was probably, I think the last time, this was several months ago. I walked into Maxim, because that's my local comic store. And the guys all know me, so they were pulling my stuff from the pull box and what have you. And then another guy saddled up next to me, and he's like, So are you buying those for your son? And Chaz behind the counter looks at him and goes, "She'll end you, dude." And he got to it real fast.
Girls who read comics or read in general are sexy and smart. I mean, I married a librarian, for goodness sakes. So I got no problem with literate and well-read females.
Yeah, so that was just how it was with comic books growing up. But now I prefer, I don't know, I mean, I read single issues. The only book I really get that's in single issue is Wonder Woman.
Mm-hmm.
And then that one I read consistently. But then the rest of the stuff, I'm kind of like you, Dub. I kind of been Blythe. I kind of like wait for the whole thing to come when it's one of those far-reaching stories, and then I just read the whole thing.
Yeah, fair enough.
Even with Wonder Woman, I might do that too.
Single issues are a young man's game.
Is that why you're starting to step out of it?
Courtney. PB does that too. Just thought I'd mention that since.
Okay.
Dub and Blythe do it, and so.
Well, those are the two I remembered hearing it come out of their mouth. So, anywho, next.
Oh wow. Okay, controversial statement by Dub, and this, I want to hear what you guys have to, retort. I believe that the graphic novel is probably the most important measuring stick of what is geek. I think everything else in the geek world comes out of graphic novels in some way or the other. I think it's the granddaddy of it all. It started what being a geek is. Maybe computers, but I think that comics are probably even above that as far as the original importance in the geek world. Discuss. Yell at me.
Well, it's kind of
dissension here. So
that's a little bit hard to put those up above toys, to be honest, because I think the toys are probably the origin of that, to be honest.
What are the best toys? Comic book toys. Still to this day.
So really, it's not graphic novels that start.
It's the comic world, but
comics.
I'm
comic book, because comic books is what start graphic novels.
Well, and graphic novels, I believe, are what comics used to be. My opinion. No. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah. What do you got?
Something here.
I would say the geek world started with literature, with things like Frankenstein and things like Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Those are just dumb books.
It's hard to say that is a geek niche when they were teaching it in college.
But just because you go to school for something doesn't mean you geek out. Like there's some literary geeks out there that geek out over their literature. And this is a hard thing to argue about, because that's the whole point of our show is that you can geek out over anything.
No, and I do agree with that.
Who's to say that geekdom didn't start with, I don't know, something old? What
actually?
What was around when you were a kid?
I think graphic novels. No. I think you're all wrong, even me, in what I said about toys, because I've thought about this in the few moments that we've been discussing this. And the bottom line is geekdom begins with one of the oldest things you could actually think of, dinosaurs. Sorry, that's where geekdom begins. The interest in dinosaurs. Seriously, what is one of the first things that a child, almost any child, is going to be interested in? Dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
It's fair dinosaurs enough. And in space.
Yeah, exactly.
The niece is going through that progression. The oldest niece, she was all about the dinosaurs. Now she's all about space.
Go ahead.
To kind of, I'm trying to dive into your mind a little bit, Dub, on where you're.
Don't do it, man. You'll get trapped.
Man, that is a chasm that you just want to avoid.
Where I'm trying to backtrack it, where geekdom as we see it, and almost like pop culture geekdom as what we see it is, and that's taking me back through people who played D&D. Well, what were those people who were playing D&D were doing? They were reading comic books and they were playing computer games
and listening to Rush. Yeah.
And then you had kids in the 50s who were reading those
comic books.
Pulp.
Yeah.
sci-fi stories.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say, yeah, I would definitely say, I don't know if it's the basis of what geekdom is today, but it definitely was a ginormous part of it.
I don't know that I'm saying that it's the basis. I think it's probably, and again, this is my opinion, I think it's probably the most important thing that really everything else in our geek world is really balanced off of. And I say, I'm not saying it's the first. I think that, I mean, you put on any geek show, comics is going to come up. You put on it, there's just something about it that is just, it's like the building block to me. If you're into sci-fi, yeah, there's a lot of comics we can talk about, a lot of graphic novels we can talk about that change the genre. Westerns, dinosaurs, space dinosaurs.
Space dinosaurs.
It exists. Doctor Who.
Space dinosaur cowboys.
Let's see. What do they have? Cowboys in space.
You know what? Copyright that right now. There's the topic of your next book, PB.
Right, exactly.
But
bestseller.
I feel like it's I can't understate the importance of graphic novels in
for sure.
In the world of geek. And I'm not, this isn't the be all end all.
In the world of geek.
Once in a while, I'm wrong. Not very often, but once in a while it does happen. But I think that it's important, and
I can't remember the last time that happened.
Most people can't.
Yeah, at least 98% of the time.
Well, there was one time that I thought I was wrong, and I wasn't. So that was my one time.
Right. Remember last episode when we talked about hacking him so we could kick him out? That's back on the table.
That hurts just a little bit. I'm gonna write a graphic novel about my pain right now.
There's another bestseller.
But just going back to kind of the graphic novel and kind of its place in regular culture, it's always, I think even if you're not into comics, I think if you see someone reading a comic book, in general, people will be like, oh, it's a comic nerd. You can sit there with an issue of Mouse, or not the graphic novel of Mouse, or Watchmen, or something that's kind of important, and people will want to talk to you because there's just something that's as far as the graphic novel goes, it seems like it's more intelligent, I guess you could say. And it may be the same thing that people are reading in the single issues, but there's something about the graphic novel, the book, that makes it look,
because it looks like a book.
Yeah.
Is it just the appearance of it?
Yep. Because it looks like a book.
Okay. I don't know. I'm silly, I guess.
You won't score those beautiful coffee shop intellect points in the same way looking at Comixology, unfortunately.
Yeah, it is true.
But
I would rather read it off Comixology because I have 7,000 comics right
the
there,
economy of space, that Comixology makes sense in that regard for sure.
Yeah.
Dub
If you're
is
not gonna
100% for the destruction of the comic book industry. Go digital.
Well, here's the problem. Here's the problem with the collected editions. I enjoy the collected editions more, so I can read the whole story at a time. However, if you don't support the single issues, then the collected edition never gets made. It's it's a catch-22. It kind of sucks.
Dichotomy.
I hear you. Yep.
Yeah. So how do people just need to start writing as graphic novels? Because I don't know what the numbers look like anymore, but I know they're kind of in the toilet. What does better, the collected editions? So should they just write them all at once, or is the single issue? Because I don't see the single issues making money like it used to make, and it makes me sad. I say I'm not a single issue reader, but it breaks my heart.
So I think this is a result of kind of geekdom and these things becoming more mainstream. So in the last 10, 15 years, there has been a huge uptick in the amount of people who are invested in these stories because of things like the Christopher Nolan's Batman, the Marvel universe. It's reached an entirely new
market
demographic of people and market and things like that. But those people who enjoy the movies and want to do it, to dive a little bit more into the lore and a little bit more into the stories of these things, they're not necessarily wanting to buy issue to issue to issue. They're not full on comic book geeks.
Mm-hmm.
They're
but it's a start.
Yes, they're just people who want to know more about it. So a graphic novel is more enticing to average Joe fan who wants to just read another Marvel story because he enjoyed the latest Captain America movie, as opposed to he's not diving 100% into the Captain America fandom and buying every single issue. He just wants that next book. So I think that's maybe why you see a dip in comic book, single issue comic book numbers and a rise in graphic novel, because it's just easier to latch on to.
Yeah, well, we have what 60 to 80 years of history with most of these characters. If you give me a graphic novel where, okay, we're going to condense some of that, give you the important parts for this story, great. But if you have to read, 100 issue run and you're like, and I still don't get all the inside jokes, I think it's part of the joy of comics, but I also think it's kind of the detriment as well. Yeah. In the 60s when they wrote comics for kids still, every 2 years they'd repeat the origin story. It wouldn't be like every 10 or 20 years where they'd flashback for some reason or reboot.
Don't they do that now like every 6 months?
Yeah, that's definitely being reprised nowadays.
Yeah.
But they're not doing it for the kids anymore. They're doing it so they can tell their own version of it.
Yeah.
And I think that, that's part, and that, wow, I feel so old, but I think that's part of the detriment of the comic industry is people want to put their names on these characters so much, and it's not about the character anymore, which is, again, why I can probably part of the joy of graphic novel, because I'm going to find the writer I like, I'm going to find the story I like, and we're not going to go all over the place and, well, he was bad here, but now he's good. I'm like, you know what I mean? So I think that
you're talking about Captain America, aren't you?
Well, that's always in the back of my head, but no, that was a piece of crap, and we're not talking
that
about
was
that.
yeah.
And it's to the point that I stopped reading. I don't even know what's going on anymore because I stopped reading them.
We said it when we did the Endgame. We're pretty sure that the Russo brothers threw that in there just to thumb their nose at the guy who created that gigantic mess.
Oh, the Hail Hydra whisper? Yeah. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
You and I talked about that, PB.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I feel like all this, I feel like you need to stop putting, yes, put your fingerprint on it, but it doesn't need to have your name on it, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, every writer will change the character a little bit, but I think it's just too much.
Yeah. Well, everyone wants to get the next biggest twist in the universe that they're writing for.
Yeah.
And it's harder and harder and harder to get those twists because so many of them have been done.
Exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
Look at how uninteresting killing and bringing back to life is now.
Oh yeah.
Wolverine's been back for a year and no one knows.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a joke that no one
gone 5 years. I'm like,
how many times has Superman died now?
Yeah. Can't count that high. I say origins change, all that. It gets I hate these Ultra reboots, and I know this isn't graphic novels, but yeah, the Ultra reboots kind of like Superman is a farmer now or something, and he's
nice sticking to what he knows.
I'm very confused on all. It's too much, but that's why, again, the graphic novel's nice because at least it'll give you the history you need to understand that story.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Wow, that was a whole lot of talk about nothing.
Yeah.
That's it's interesting. That's what a lot and also that last thing you said, like the superhero occupation of shame or failure or anonymity is farming for some reason. There's a lot of like superheroes that return that go back to farming. Because I know Thanos did it, Superman did it,
there's something about that.
Wolverine did it. It's like
copyright
farming.
Graphic novel superheroes in their farming.
Edition.
They're farming, the farming edition.
But well, you know what? But that's something that, and I want to explore this for a second because that's something I never thought about. where do all comic stories usually end up? In the
On
East
the
Coast?
farm.
No, they're always the East Coast or the West Coast, and there's a slight flyover for Kansas or wherever.
Yeah.
But they're all in big cities, and I feel like there's more people that probably in the middle of the country, the flyover states, that probably read comics. I don't know if that's true or not. Our listeners can put the comments.
So you're
down
telling
there.
that you're saying that they get their token farming moment. That's what you're saying here.
I think there needs to be some stories that are kind of, we want to talk inclusive in comics, and I think that is part of the market that, the down home American, that's been gone for years. I think it is time to bring some of that into comics again. I like all the other stuff they're doing, but let's add that in too.
Well, the next big arc is going to be Wolverine, Thanos, and Superman. All their biggest battle yet is at the state fair to see who gets the blue ribbon.
Who has the blue ribbon cow?
Who grows the biggest pumpkin? Yeah, exactly.
Well, then they need to bring in Batman, because Batman's got Bat Cow and everything else now.
See, the problem with bringing in Batman, he's just going to pay his way to the top.
And Batman wins everything because Batman's the most important.
He's either going to come and screw up the fair because, there's something dark going on here that he needs to get all involved in, or he's gonna pay his way to the genetically engineered pumpkin.
Wow.
The judges have been corrupt for years.
I feel like I'm being mocked, but I'm going with it.
We just went off on the coolest tangent.
Farming.
Okay,
let's ask this question before we go on to listener feedback. Yes, our top 5 is, what is our favorite comic or graphic novels? What do you think is the most important graphic novel ever written?
The most important one?
Important one. It changed the industry. Not personal. This is just for the industry. We're going to say Watchmen, of course.
Okay.
Don't pander to him.
Watchmen is off the table.
Watchmen was a game changer.
It was.
Whether you like it or not, it was a game changer in the graphic novel industry.
I can say that you could possibly be right about that, but I would put up as a contender The Dark Knight Returns. Because I honestly think you want to talk about an industry game changer. There you go.
I'll agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
I think that the Sandman is something that's overlooked a lot.
Yeah.
Sandman won a Peabody Award, the only comic in history that's done it.
Get out of here.
How important is that? No, seriously. That is complete and total mainstream, high intellectual level writing that went on with that. I mean, whether you like it or not, it's probably some of the most profound writing in a comic ever. And I don't think it works outside of the graphic novel. But that is, I would say that's probably one of the most important is Sandman, because it really did transcend, the genre between, the highbrow and, Superman and Archie readers. If that makes sense.
Okay.
The art was on next level, everything. So I think that's probably one of the more important ones that we forget about.
I'm with you.
What do you say, Blythe?
I don't know, because by the time I was old enough to start doing these things, graphic novels were already established. You've been there since the graphic novels were chiseled.
Well, I don't think I'm not talking about the first. I'm just talking about what do you think is important.
I can't tell you.
Think we are?
Oh, yeah.
I wonder about that.
80, 82.
You're up there for sure.
I feel so decrepit sometimes when he's talking.
And you're not. He's not that much younger than us. That's what's funny.
That's because he's 13 and a half.
What year did Sandman come out?
90s.
Yeah, 90s.
So I was watching freaking Gargoyles on Disney. It's just hard for me to put stock into like what really
1989.
1980. So I was born. I was born when Sandman came out.
Yeah, I was a year out of graduating high school.
The difference is, as geeks, you should be able to take away from your personal experience. And I say, this isn't what I'm saying as far as the importance, as far as your personal. What do you think is the important one as far as, the everything in general, the geek world or whatever? It's not personal, because I mean, I can say that MASH is probably the greatest TV show ever, and it came out like the year I was born or something.
But here's my
Wow,
thing
that was
with it.
dismissive.
So when you ask me what I think like the most important graphic novels are, it's not Sandman or Watchmen that comes to my mind. It's when I introduce somebody to comic books for the first time, it's what I introduce them to, and that's probably more of the bigger story arcs of all time, because that's more of what, I don't know, I guess that's more what I gravitate towards when I read graphic novels, is more those overarching stories that were in the single issues that I want to show somebody. So it's the Old Man Logan's, it's the Civil War, the Infinity Gauntlet, like those types of stories to me are the more important stories, because I know that that's what's going to catch someone's interest when trying to introduce them into the genre. I don't know if I would hand somebody the Sandman graphic novel right off the bat. Maybe someone who's dabbled a little bit, but I wouldn't I wouldn't give them Sandman right off the bat and be like, this is why you should read comic books. Like that would be something that I'd give them down the line of being like, well, you enjoyed these stories. This is the next step up, because this is what, like you said, this is what kind of transcends that line of superhero stories to actual like top brow literature.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that actually is a different question altogether. And let's ask this. Let's say your friend John Doe comes up to you, or Jane Doe, and says, you know what? I want to read a comic. Where should I start? What graphic novel do you hand them?
If my friend was named John or Jane Doe, I'd be very suspicious of that friendship. I just want you to know that.
I gave him that name on purpose.
Okay.
So it's, in other words, it doesn't matter how well you know them or what their history is. What do you?
I
say,
know
this is my
that.
go-to.
I'm just joking.
No, and I want to reiterate. This is what I want you to read. If you're into this, you will love, this world I'm about to expose you to. Which graphic novel do you hand them?
I hand them The Dark Knight Returns, honestly, again, just because I think it is the game changer of comics.
I love the story. It doesn't do much for me, to be honest.
I love the animated.
The animated is fantastic. Yeah.
The animated is great.
They didn't pull any punches on that either. Yeah. I was surprised.
For me, it would be Old Man Logan. And just because like I said earlier, there's so many people that know these characters now. Like, we're so far into comic book culture being in the mainstream that people know who Wolverine are. They know who Hawkeye is. They know who Captain America. Like, they know all these characters, and they know them in a particular light. Yeah. So you know who these characters are. You know what they do. They're the generic superhero. You hand them Old Man Logan, and it shows you all of these different types of characters and where they kind of ended up in this dystopian future. Yeah. So it gives you another look at a genre that you thought you knew. It flips that for someone who's not familiar with the source material.
Fair enough. Courtney, what about you?
I don't know. It's a really hard question.
It was made to be.
But but my thing is, like, I don't read, like, I haven't read Watchmen. I haven't read, you know what I mean? Like, I haven't.
And you've read Vampirella.
I read, like, the graphic novels that I tend to read are actually more indie-ish. So it's like, Bly says, if you hand them something that's got Captain America in it, they're going to understand it. If you hand them something, like if you hand them The Dark Knight Rises, like PB mentioned, they're going to...
You know who Batman is.
You know who Batman is. Like, in my case, it's like I have a bunch of them that are indie that no one, unless you read indie stuff, you're not going to have a clue. There's not that familiarity, and it doesn't really... I don't think they really teach...
Yeah, that's probably not... That's not gateway type comics.
Yeah, so they're not indicative of what a graphic novel is always going to be like.
And to bounce off PB's, it's another example of what I'm talking about. Everyone knows who Batman is. There's not a person on this planet that you ask who Batman is, they don't know who Batman is. but everyone may not necessarily be familiar with that type of Batman.
Yeah.
That's a very dark Batman, like a very
it is
different type of Batman,
very wordy Batman.
Than what a lot of people are familiar with,
Yeah,
and that's why that's a good jumping into book. Like that's
even though Neil Adams kind of gets the credit for darkening Batman, The Dark Knight Returns gave us the Michael Keaton, Tim Burton Batman, gave us the Batman the Animated Series, gave us all these Batman things that we love today.
Yeah,
really spawned out of The Dark Knight Returns. So Courtney makes a really good point about if you have a lot of indie comics, you don't gateway people in through indie comics. You gateway people in through the big familiar
known properties.
Yeah, what they're familiar with. Mm-hmm.
And then if you can do something like Dark Knight Returns, tell it in a very different way than Batman had been told previous to Dark Knight Returns, you then get something interesting as well as familiar.
Yeah. But there's something about steering people away from the superhero genre. If they're going to be interested in the superhero genre, they're going to be interested in it. They've already read it. Mm-hmm. It's when you can find something else that's not superhero, that's comic, that's kind of envisions all that. And a great example for me, it's on my list, but I'll use it again, is Fables. Any of those graphic novels are amazing because it's got characters that with the the fairy tales. It's not superhero. It's very well written, but grounded enough that a 13-year-old can understand it.
Yeah, but if I may interject here, Fables and Dark Knight Returns do the exact same thing.
Yeah,
they are identical in what they do.
Takes characters and it puts them into a more interesting light because of the different story they're saying. What I think is harder is if you were to hand someone who is completely new to comic books and graphic novels, if you hand them something, like I said, like Sandman, or even like Watchmen. If you hand someone who's never heard of Watchmen before and they start to read it, like, scary. Why do I care about these characters? Like, I've got in some aspects, some people will be like, well, these are just knockoffs of characters I've already know.
Yeah.
Because they share traits with different things. So I definitely think there's certain books that are easier to get somebody into reading. Yeah, it's a gateway into than others for sure.
So in the comments, actually, I'd like to hear this. What for all our listeners, what comic book would you give somebody as the gateway for, to fall into this beautiful habit that we all have, and that's reading comic books? What is your gateway drug, for lack of a better term, as far as comic book goes? What do you hand people?
Archie versus the Predator.
You know what? Archie Double Digest has gotten more people into comic books than any other comic.
Those are some of my first ones.
It was my first one.
Howard the effing Duck.
No.
Yes, Howard the Duck. Dude.
Yeah, that's not abstract at all. Play Duck. Okay, let's move on and let's get to our listener feedback.
And now, let's see what all of our geek rock stars have to say.
Okay, Courtney, you got some listener feedback for us today?
I do. So we asked, what was your favorite graphic novel? Yes,
we did.
So we got Christina Belden, Captain Marvel. I love the story arc of Billy Batson. I especially loved that an orphan 12-year-old boy can be transformed into a superhero by simply saying Shazam and being struck by bolts of lightning. Sean Washington. That's what it says.
Cute, PB. Yeah.
Sean Washington says Batman, A Death in the Family. showcased how coldly fans could turn on a character despite the alignment with one of the greatest characters in modern literature.
Carl.
That would be a great.
Yeah, Kaj and Carl. That's who you turn your aggression toward. Exactly.
That would be a great gateway story.
Yeah. You know what? There is something to that because it does show how the comic book industry has changed. You can kill a character.
Yep.
You know, and that there's more than one Robin.
Yeah.
Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
That's okay. TC says
the voice.
Sandman, and nothing else comes close. Simply put, the storyline has so many monumentally complex characters, and the protagonist, the hero of the piece, is willing to make the ultimate sacrifice in order to ensure continuation. It takes a rather adult topic and runs with it. And then Dino from the
podcast,
Batman Nightfall. To see a villain who can best Batman physically and strategically was a gut shot to me. And then Skeeter Thompson said Watchmen, but he's referring to the series. He said he just watched the first season of Watchmen, and he's still reeling from the experience. It has an incredible story and strangely fits a narrative of the current situation.
Sorry, there's only going to be one season. They aren't going to do a second one, unfortunately.
But so does Demolition Man.
Right.
Oh, wow.
I struggled on the beginning to catch on as I still haven't seen the actual movie yet. But it sets the scene for what's to come. I think he's actually talking about the book in this particular case.
Yeah.
So that's what we've got. There you go. Thanks for the feedback, guys.
Thank you, guys. We appreciate it, as always. You know, we love it. Actually, before we move on, I do have a question. Do you think this series should be made into a graphic novel? Or has it been said?
What?
The Watchmen. I apologize.
The new one?
The series. Should that be
made? No, because you've already got the
Doomsday. Seen it. Again, I haven't seen it.
You've already got the Doomsday Clock, which is one version of a sequel. Yeah. And then you've got this is almost like you get a choice. You could choose your own sequel or watch them both or whatever, because
nothing should be canon.
Well, Doomsday Clock is probably canon if you want to get down to it.
Yeah.
This Watchmen HBO series is Elseworlds, in my opinion.
Fair enough. Okay, let's jump on and go to our main event.
Now it's time for the main event.
Okay, on this version of the main event, we are discussing our top 5 graphic novels of all time. Now, these are all personal. That has nothing to do with the importance of the world or whatever. This has everything to do with what do we feel the closest to for whatever reason.
What we like.
And yeah, there's a lot of these that were given up by other people because we all love them. So yeah, there's a lot of these that are on everybody's list, if that makes sense. Okay, so my number 5 is something different. It's called Lock and Key. Fantastic Netflix story as well. It's the artwork in it is everything that I want in a comic book. The way the lines are, the coloring, everything is perfect. The story is compelling, interesting, without being pretentious. I highly recommend it. It's Joe Hill, which is Stephen King's son.
The spawn of King.
The spawn of King. So should it be Joe Prince then instead of Joe Hill?
I haven't read it, but the Netflix show is fantastic. I love the Netflix show.
I'm gonna have you take a look at the art of the graphic novel. If you don't want to read it after that, I will be.
I've seen it. I've been wanting to read it. I just haven't gotten around to it. But I remember when you did your video on it. I was looking at some imagery from the books, and it looks. I did want to read it. I just haven't gotten around to it, but Netflix show is great.
Yeah, it's one of those books that the artwork takes it from, let's say it was an 8, it takes it up to a 12. And it is just, that artwork is just something special. There's not a whole lot of books that can say that's my style of what I love. So, Courtney, what is your number 5?
All right, my number 5 is Wolverine: The Long Night. They took the serialized podcast that they had done and they did a graphic novel version of it. The podcast is amazing, and the book follows it to a T. And because it is the visual media, you get a lot more than you would. I mean, you get a lot when you listen to the podcast, but with this, you get the visual as well as the remembering audible of the
yeah.
Fair enough.
That's it.
Lies, what's your number 5, sir?
My number 5 is the Infinity Gauntlet / the Thanos quest, and I think they have renditions of it now where you can get the two combined. But I think that the Thanos quest is definitely a really cool precursor that a lot of people don't really read, and that's his actual like story
motivation
of him obtaining all of the Infinity Stones.
It's actually still kind of a tricky graphic novel to find.
Yeah.
Thanos Quest. It's hard to find.
It's a rare one? Is it rare?
It might be less rare than it was, because there was an edition of it released recently.
Reprint.
But for the longest time, it was very hard to find.
Yeah. Like I said, I think there's a reprint, especially around the time of the movies being released, and things where they have it. It's the Thanos quest, and then he rolls right into Infinity Gauntlet.
Right.
But yeah, again, this is why I like the graphic novels and the comicsology stuff, is because you can find this stuff that you couldn't find before. You know, you want to read Action Comics #1? Guess what? I got it for free. You know, I mean,
that's why I'm reading all of the old original She-Hulks from the 80s.
It's so nice to be able to, because this stuff you couldn't find before, and that's why graphic novel form or digital form, it's so nice just to be able to have it. You know, because I think these stories are important, not just because of the value. PB.
It's funny because in my advanced age, I'm suffering from certain memory gaps, and so my countdown is going to shift just slightly. And something I said earlier about DC and Marvel is going to change when it comes to my number 1. But we'll get to that. So I'll start with my number 5. The game changer of comics, The Dark Knight Returns, is my number 5.
Fair enough.
And there's really nothing more to say about it.
For all the reasons you've already said.
I think it's an important comic. I like the story. I didn't like the art style, and I think that's part of why I didn't love it as much as everyone else. And that's just me. That's me.
I can agree with that. The art was
really important to me.
The art has some issues. If you don't like Frank Miller's style, I get that. Yeah.
I mean, I love his storytelling. So it's a tough place that you got to learn to read it. Okay, so let's see. We're on number 4, and my number 4 is the entire series because it all is in graphic novel form, of Fables. Talk about going on a journey with probably 40 characters, and you will love and respect and know about all of them. There isn't one character that you follow through the story, and it is, it's just so beautifully done, and so a touch into your childhood without being nostalgia, if that makes sense. It's not because you were like these things as a kid or know of them, but it helps.
Of the various things that you recommended to me over the years, Dub, Fables is the one that sticks the most for me. Fables was incredible, an incredibly written story. Absolutely.
Yeah. Highly recommended to everyone. Okay, Courtney.
My number 4 is called Hit 1955. It's one of those indie ones I was talking about. It obviously takes place in 1955. It is this noir comic that follows this pretty unkempt and surly detective as he tries to find this woman he had an affair with, who is also wanted by a local mobster, and it takes place in Southern California.
Cool.
Sounds good.
It's pretty.
I'm in.
The graphics, I'll let you guys borrow it next time I see you.
Okay.
Coolness.
So in 2 years, gotcha.
Right.
2023.
Right. We'll be 107 by then.
Lies?
My number 4 is Batman Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth.
Wow, that's deep.
Now,
A serious title.
I say this not remembering what any of it's about. So the reason why I put it on my list is what I do remember is the like emotional feelings that I had while I was reading it. So the art is very like daunting. It's very eerie art, and it's one of the darkest books that I remember reading. But it just dubbed for someone who loves like actually diving into the art of the book. Google it and really and look at it, because it's very like, it's almost like very grainy, like dark rain kind of. Like I don't know how to explain.
Like Sin City-ish.
It's not. I don't know. Just Google it. All of our listeners, Google it. I'm probably going to reread it now that I feel like a fool for putting it on a list and not remembering what it's about. But I just remember it was really good, and it was almost one of those books like I read it at night and I started to like get freaked out a little bit.
That was last week, so nice.
Yeah.
Okay. PB?
My number 4 is Mark Millar's Superman Red Sun, which we have talked about before. What if young Kal-El skipped right over Kansas and ended up in the Soviet Union during communism, during their height of communism. It is an absolutely fascinating story that we've kind of talked about before on other shows. But the summary is, without being a spoiler, is Superman is always Superman. And that's the cool aspect of that story.
Well, this could be written by George Orwell. I'm just saying that's, if you're into the Orwellian history, it's definitely an important book. Does that make sense? Would you say I'm kind of okay on that, Jason?
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
Very 1984.
Well,
Animal Farm-ish.
I mean, it does heavily feature communism. So yeah, I mean, there you go, you know.
Fair enough. Okay, so we are on number 3, and I'm changing number 3. Yes, Sandman is still one of the greatest comics ever written, one of the greatest graphic novels ever written, greatest stories ever written. We've talked it to death. So I'm going to switch it over to Wanted, another Mark Millar twisted thought. It's all the bad guys. It's no bad guy that you've ever heard of in your life. It's very adult, but it's a different dimension. And this is the dimension the bad guys won. And it's watching a guy's journey into evil, and you're rooting for him the whole time. I don't.
You just took away Bly's number 1. No, I'm kidding.
Is this the same story that the movie's based off of?
It was based kind of on it.
Okay.
It's very loosely based on it. The book is, if you don't like dark, don't read it. Yeah. But it's another one of those great artwork, incredible story, and just entertaining from start to finish. Highly recommended. Courtney, what is your number 3?
My number 3 is Batman and the Shadow, Murder Geniuses. And
another serious title.
Right. It's the Batman and the Shadow, the old pulp hero, the Shadow, team up and kind of do what they do together. Which is a fun team up because the Shadow is basically what Batman was before there was a Batman.
Yeah, that's true.
It works really, really well together.
So my question about that is, do they spend a whole lot of time in that story? Like one will be talking and then he'll turn and the other one will be gone. Do they do that like constantly to each other?
Wah wah.
No. But yeah, it's dark, and I mean, it's just if you like Batman and if you like the old pulp heroes, which you know I do, it's really fun. Right, my entire list is all noir stuff. I just noticed that. Yeah, it's a fun team up to see, and it's dark. It's not dark as some of the other ones that we all have on our list, but it's pretty fun.
Nice,
I like it.
Mr. Bly's
number 3, right?
Yep.
My number 3 is Buffy the Vampire Slayer season 8.
Cool.
Now I read this, my first watch through of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, because I felt like I wanted the story to continue from that show. And I feel like that graphic novel gave that to me. and it was a really solid like jump from season 7 to season 8.
Totally agree.
Yep. And I enjoyed it. I never got past season 8. I kind of wish that I would have, because I know there's other seasons after that. But yeah, definitely if you're into Buffy the Vampire Slayer and you wanted that story to continue, I definitely recommend it.
Nice.
Very cool.
Oh, okay. My number 2 is... did I do that again? That one was on purpose. That one was actually on purpose.
Yeah, it was on purpose.
Like you forgot PB.
Go ahead.
My number 3 is another of the big comic game changers, and this would be the Death of Superman, which was... Sorry, say again?
I'm sensing a theme.
Yeah. I wouldn't say... the Death of Superman was not the first death of a comic book character historically, but it was probably the most profound at the time, that they actually took, one of the icons of superheroes and killed him. Although granted, it was only for a year before he was back. But at the time, this was before it became as passé as it is now. And it was hugely impactful. And not only is the comic graphic novel itself good, but the extended little novel like that extends on it is also fantastic as far as just what it meant for Superman to die, and just how, and then there's several stories after that with the 4 Supermen and all that. It's one of the best arcs in comics, in my opinion, for sure.
I can agree. Okay. My number 2 is, and Blythe is going to argue with me, is one Scott Pilgrim, the black and white version, not the colorized. The book that is inside of the Oasis. Just saying. Tell us your problem with you having this on my list.
My problem is that this is a show about graphic novels, and now that you've even stated that it's the black and white version that you prefer over the colored version, Scott Pilgrim is not a graphic novel. It is a manga.
Is Sin City black and white?
It doesn't matter.
If that's
Sin City is a graphic novel.
So
Sin City isn't shaped like a tiny book.
And it's not manga. It
is a manga.
Really? It's Canadian.
It's a manga.
No,
it's a Canadian book that was written in a manga format. It's a manga, not a graphic novel.
You are allowed, and I appreciate your opinion. You're wrong, but I appreciate it.
No, I don't appreciate
you
your
have
opinion.
no idea how entertaining this is for me to watch.
No. PB and I are enjoying this very much.
It's all right.
To be that wrong? I'm just curious.
The oldest people normally think that they're the correct, but hey,
I'm not the oldest.
Well, being the oldest one here, I generally am. So
there's a reason we don't play stickball anymore.
Yeah, I'm glad you got your polio vaccine. Okay, Blythe, what is your number 2?
You guys are killing me.
That was good.
That was good.
Your number 2, sir.
Blythe, right?
Yeah.
No,
Blythe.
Courtney, right?
No, Courtney.
No,
Courtney didn't do
Courtney?
her 2.
Okay. I'm looking at this all checked up. Okay.
You and me, PB, we get forgotten today.
See, that's what happens. The mind is the first thing to go. The mind is the first thing to go. I'm sorry.
A mind is a terrible thing to taste.
Terrible thing to waste. Okay. My number 2 is The Black Dahlia. It is a graphic novel version of the James Ellroy novel.
Cool.
It's beautiful and it's dark, and not the movie version, because the movie does not follow the book like it should. It's a piece of garbage. Super
what
garbage.
You really think.
It's terrible. But the book is amazing. And I did promise to loan Dub that one, so he gets first dibs.
Nice.
First dibs on that one.
Nice. Okay, now Blythe gets to go.
My number 2, and for the reason that it is a huge gateway book for me to get to people, is Civil War. Civil War is one of those books. I know now that the movie's out, there's a different kind of look at it, but when it first came out, it was one of those books that really flipped those characters in that genre on it.
That's Mark Millar too.
Yep, Mark Millar.
Yep. Was never a fan of that one.
Really?
Yeah.
Actually, me neither. Civil War was one of the books that actually knocked me out of comics.
I get it. Yeah.
What's the reason?
Well, it's very well written. I won't take that away from it. I just don't
story.
like the story. I
It's
just
a terrible
absolutely
story.
don't like the story at all. The other one was Identity Crisis, or I think from DC,
Yeah.
or one of those Identity ones, not Identity Crisis. It was
Crisis on Infinite Earths.
No, it was the one where Ralph Dibny's wife, the murder, that whole one with Elastic
Elastigirl. Yeah.
No, Ralph Dibny.
Yeah, Elastic.
He's a stretchy guy, and his wife, the murder of his wife, and all that. It's Identity something. I want to say Identity Crisis, but that one in Civil War, because I didn't like that turn in comics toward superheroes fighting
great.
bad guys to superheroes in their issues.
Everything's great. Yeah, I've never liked it either.
But I'm sorry, I stepped all over you. I didn't mean to do that. Go ahead, Blythe.
No, you're good. No, I wanted to see why you guys didn't like that, but yeah.
It was the mark between there's good guys and bad guys to, well, there's good guys and not just the anti-heroes, but everybody is just a different shade of gray, and that was the turning point. That's probably why.
And I think that's probably why I like it, because that's life. Everything is gray. There are
good people and bad people.
No, there are good people and bad people, but even those good people and bad people have their gray moments.
It went against what I like about escapism. Honestly, that was what it was.
That's completely fine. I understand.
But it is completely well written, no doubt about it.
Philosophy 101 with Ice.
Okay. So to keep Dove from skipping me, I'll just talk right through it. No, I'm kidding. Thank you. I heard you say PB.
Right now.
I heard you say PB, so that's cool. So I'm going to make a tie out of my number 2, because I'm going to have a different number 1. And actually my number 1 is going to be a Marvel story, because I completely forgot about this. Yeah, I completely forgot about this story, but it's even better than The Death of Captain Marvel, and I'm so ashamed of myself for forgetting. So I'm going to do my tie on number 2, Watchmen. We've already talked about it. That's a thick and wonderful book. Alan Moore, Dave Gibbons. Everyone and Courtney should make a point to read it.
I will. I promise.
It's important.
And then my tie with that is the second Preacher graphic novel called Until the End of the World. And the reason that one is so profound for me is I absolutely love backstories. I'm like a backstory junkie. And where I read the first Preacher novel, graphic novel collection of those editions, and I wasn't on board even after reading that first one. It was like, okay, this is
really
interesting and cool, but I wasn't hooked in. But as soon as we did the Jesse Custer backstory and Jody and the family and all that stuff, in the second graphic novel, I was completely hooked on Preacher from that point on. So that is my number 2s.
Very good. Okay. My number 1 should come as no surprise to anyone who's talked to me for more than 10 minutes about comics, and that is Blackest Night, the whole freaking omnibus, 1,000-page monster. You got to see every character that died in the DC universe, except for one, come back in zombie form, and some came back forever, and it was a turning point for comics, and it's really what reignited me falling in love with comics again. Highly recommend it, and yeah, Blackest Night, rate it. All right, awesome. I like you, Courtney.
It's good. You recommended that one to me. I enjoyed it. It was very well written.
I recommend a lot, don't I?
You do. Okay, so my number 1 is an indie. My best friend turned me onto it. It's called Dust Bunny, and it's by a guy named Brett. Hold on,
Michaels?
I got it back here.
Brett Michaels.
No, wish.
Brett Brooks.
Brooks.
It is about a bunny that's actually made out of dust. And he's a detective, a bunny detective in Basement City. And it's full of puns, and it's campy noir, and it's black and white. It's just so much fun.
Nice.
Blythe? My number 1, I won't spend too much time on it because I've mentioned it like 6 times during this podcast, but Old Man Logan. Just a great, got me back into reading and collecting comic books again, and just one of the best stories ever. And that's Millar too, right?
Yes.
Yep.
And I wish that would have been I wish that would have been the Logan movie, but they couldn't get the rights, I'm sure.
Can do it. We might. I've heard rumors, and who's to say, this was a long time ago too, that they might try and do it again, but swap out swap out Wolverine for Captain America.
No, I'm good. Give me the animated version of the book. I'm good.
I think you could do it in the MCU.
Maybe.
Yeah.
PB?
My number one is a Marvel entry, and I am so ashamed of myself, like I said, for forgetting about it. It was written by Greg Pak. We saw a watered-down version of it in Thor Ragnarok, and that is Planet Hulk.
Planet Hulk.
I
can't believe I forgot about that one. Thank you.
Planet Hulk is the most amazing, and I don't know how I forgot it. I honestly don't, because it's the most amazing graphic novel I've ever read.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, it's I won't even spoil it. Just go find a way to read it.
There's an animated version out there you can find too that's really good, by the
Probably
way.
on Comic
The animated version is not.
It's not as good, but it's
even
good.
Close to being as good.
It's better than the Ragnarok version.
Okay, that's true, but it's not as good as the. It's not as good as the graphic novel. The graphic novel, it's about a group of superheroes thinking Hulk is too much of a problem. They send him away to another planet, and he establishes himself, and then faces tragedy. And it's just an amazing story. It led to World War Hulk. It led to some things after that were pretty fascinating.
And it introduced a character that I think is so underrated but so amazing, and that's Scar. Because
Scar?
Came off the aftermath of all that. And to me, vastly more interesting than Hulk is Scar, if you want to go check any of his stuff out. I think that they should have done more with him.
That was one of the graphic novels that when I read it, I wanted to have the first print single editions of the whole arc, which took me a long time to hunt down, but I finally was able to. So I have that collection of that
very cool
story.
Outstanding. And that's a show, kids. I'm sorry to be cutting off, but I have to because time.
Gotta go.
Take a listen to the end of the show, and you can find all of our links. And if you want to shop our Redbubble and shop our Amazon, tells you how to do it. You should do it. You should do it now. Do it now. And until next time, I'm Dub.
I'm Miss Geeky Paige.
I'm Blythe.
I'm PB&Jason.
Jason can say it.
Keep on geeking on.
Later.
And on,
geeking on, guys.
Okay, gotta go.
Bye-bye.
You have been listening to the latest episode of the iHeart Geek Show. Make sure you visit our website at www.iheartgeekshow.com. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And if you check us out on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And keep on geeking on to all of you geek rock stars.